want to make sure. Oh, wait, did we just start? Oh, hello. Oh my God, I do this every single time. My alarm starts blasting for the 9 a.m. TMF week session. Hi, guys. Welcome. Sorry about that. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon from wherever you're tuning in from. Can you hear me clearly? Can you see the screen? Let us know in the chat, and welcome to another exciting day of TMF week 2025, everybody. So I'm looking to see in the session, can you guys hear me? People are filling in. Hi from the UK. Hi, Monica. Hey, Kim. Who else is in there? Where else? Rattle off in the chat where you guys are tuning in from. We love to see London, Ontario. Let's go. Los Angeles. Hey, my hometown. Represent San Diego, California. Let's go. We love Southern California. Guys, welcome and thanks for coming. So I'm going to hit us with, first of all, we have a really exciting session today. We have a very fun group of ladies with us today that are going to be hosting. So we are going to be getting into the housekeeping really quick, and then I'm going to pass it over to them. So this session's a little different than usual, but mostly the same. So we have all sessions are going to be recorded and available at the end of the conference. All attendees are going to be receiving a certificate at the end of a conference. So we always get emails after each session. Hey, where's my certificate? Don't worry, you will get it. It is on the way. They are going to come at the end of the conference at the end of the week. Questions are going to be actually throughout the presentation today, not at the end. So please use the QA tab on the right side to play along, because this is a game show session. It's going to be a very, very fun interactive time for you guys in the chat. We're going to do a networking break also at the end for the 15 minutes as usual. But like I said, the biggest thing is to be answering your questions in the chat. There's no slide deck for this session, so don't be alarmed if you don't see anything in the docs tab. But yeah, guys, so welcome to Whose Job Is It Anyway? TMF Roles and Responsibilities Game Show with Suzanne Turner, Ann Ackley-Pfeiffer, India Gardner, and Taryn Mayich. So guys, I will go backstage and leave the floor to you.
Thanks, Danny. Hi, everyone. So my name is Suzanne Turner, and I'm the owner of ICE Consulting and the host of the Heart of the Trial podcast. And I am hosting today's game show. So I've been in the industry for a little over 12 years, and I tend to work with smaller sponsors doing anything TMF related. So before I tell you about how the game's going to work, let me introduce our awesome contestants in the panel. So I'll throw it to you, Taryn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taryn Myatt. I have been in the industry going on 10 years this year.
Right, Ann?
Ann, yeah.
Hi, my name's Ann Ackley-Pfeiffer, and I have been doing TMF since 2006. Way too long. For too much fun, right?
It is. India?
Hi, I'm India Gardner, and I have been in the industry for 12 years. I think this year makes 13 coming up, but yeah.
Awesome. All right, so the way this is going to work, everyone, and I apologize if you hear my dogs are very excited this morning, but the way this is going to work is it's going to be very interactive. I'm going to put our SMEs to the test, but you guys are going to get to participate too. So as I'm asking them the questions, you're going to see the poll pop up. I believe it's actually going to pop up on the screen, but it could be over to your left. Oh, there you go. So it looks like one just popped up for an example. So you're going to want to pull that up and answer. And you have three options. It's the sponsor, it's the site, or it's the CRO. We'll give you about 15 seconds, and then we'll get to see the results. And then we'll find out what our SMEs say. So definitely, if you have any questions, throw them in the Q&A, and Danny's going to make sure we know if we have stuff coming through. So are you all ready to start? Okay, woo. Alrighty, so our first question, if we can get our poll up for everyone. Okay, so who is responsible for preparing the trial master file and ensuring it is inspection ready? Give you guys just a couple more seconds here. Again, go to the poll, Okay, do we have our results? Okay, oh, we have a little bit of a mix. Okay, thanks, Danny. Oh, some more was coming in. Perfect. Okay, so SMEs, whose job is that? sponsor. Yes, it is the sponsor's responsibility. So, Taryn, why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about this? Because I see we've got a little bit of a mixture.
Yeah, so it's actually quite, as you said, we were interested to see what the question or the answers were going to be. So yes, per regulations, in the new ICH E6R3 update, it is the sponsor's responsibility to maintain and ensure that the TMF is inspection ready at all times during the conduct of the study. And as a member of a recent FDA inspection, I can tell you that that is critical. Having a inspection ready TMF with documentation, we knew where to find it and how to find it, resulted in a approval inspection with no 483 findings and no recommendations, no nothing, clean, good to go. And it really just showed the amount of effort that we had put in really paid off. And I could go on for hours about how, having a TMF first mindset really is important, and ensuring that your study teams have that mindset and that documents aren't getting lost in a SharePoint site or in some central mailbox. That is key. And it's interesting to see those that have said that it's the CRO responsibility, because in my mind, I'm assuming that you've delegated those tasks to that CRO. And in that case, I can see how you would think like, oh, okay, well, we've delegated those responsibilities, whether it be on the Toro or a scope of work, whatever it might be, to that vendor. However, when you perform that, when that inspection happens, they're not going to go to the CRO for that TMF. They're going to come to you. And so if you are in that mindset now, I would consider looking at, when at that study point, do you bring that TMF in-house? If ever, sometimes it can stay with that CRO and you just have access, but you're going to be responsible for providing that documentation to the inspector, not the CRO member. So just keep that in the back of your minds.
Yeah, I think this is, I feel like several years ago, this is something that became a big issue, like a lot of FDA findings. And that's why like it's become so common recently for sponsors to be bringing their TMFs in-house.
Yeah. And it is a new thing for sponsors to be bringing them in-house, but I have also seen models where they have a long-term, contract with the CRO, and they just keep the TMF, but you have to make sure you have access and you know what's in there and you're aware of the content. Because the responsibility will lie on you at the end of the day when, the FDA is like, why is this documentation taking so long to come in, or, whatever might be the issue. So
Awesome. Okay, well, let's move on to our next question. So, Danny, if you'd be kind enough to get our next poll going. Okay, who ensures source documents are accurate, complete, and up to date? Give the audience just a little more time here. Okay, let's take a look at our result. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, so we've got really mixed here. So SMEs, whose job is that? That's right. It is the site. It is the site. Wow, I can't wait to chat about this one. Okay, I'm throwing this to you, India. Are you shocked at how mixed this is?
I am shocked at how mixed it is, and I see a lot more votes coming in where it's leaning more toward the sponsor ensuring that the source documents are accurate. And I want to make sure that everyone is kind of reading the question a bit. We want to ensure that we are referring to source documents and not maybe just templates or anything that is provided to your service provider or the sites to complete. So the key word or the key phrases in this is source documents. And so it is up to the site to ensure that those source documents are accurate. Why? Because they overall are in contact with the data, the subjects that they're getting this data from. So we want to make sure that we're relying on the site to document and record any type of subject data, any type of, making sure that the signature dates are correct and that they're abiding by the same regulations that we are as well in order to maintain accurate documentation throughout the life of the study. So I did kind of talk to one of my team members about this before and kind of giving grace to our service providers and also our sponsors as well. Whenever we do, as in TMF, we do receive records that are not necessarily in the best shape when we do get them. They're not necessarily accurate or complete sometimes. And so we want to make sure that we give our teams a little bit of grace because it does require them to go back to the site, have those conversations, and collect that accurate and complete documentation. So now I can see that the votes are kind of going down to the site level as I'm continuing to talk, but yeah, so it is the site's responsibility initially to ensure that those records are complete.
Wonderful. And it looks like we have a really good question. So Danny, you want to throw us a question? Okay. Interesting to reflect on TMF responsibilities given the new ICH E6R3. Don't sponsors, sites, and vendor community all have record regulatory responsibilities? Believe so. Definition alignment is helpful to clarity. And
yeah, I think I'm understanding the question, but essentially, of course, all the sponsor, the CRO, and sites all ultimately have TMF responsibilities, and it is outlined what those responsibilities ultimately are within R3 as well. For the question at hand in terms of the source documents and making sure they're accurate and complete, we want to ensure that it starts at the origin, rather, which is the site. Of course, once they get to the service provider, or if a sponsor has an in-house TMF, once it gets to the sponsor and they're reviewing these records, it is our also responsibility to make sure that we're accurately reviewing documentation so that in the event that it wasn't caught at the origin, that we are catching that and that it is not ending up in the TMF in an incomplete state. And essentially we all do have responsibilities in ensuring that records are accurate and complete. However, we want to ensure that those site personnel understand that they're the origin and following that at firsthand.
Yeah, and just jumping
go ahead,
in,
Karen.
just to jump in a little bit related to my question of question 1, with who is responsible for preparing the TMF. Obviously, yes, sponsors, sites, vendors, CROs, everybody has a regulatory responsibility to the sponsor to ensure that TMF is inspection ready. However, at the end of the day, when that inspection occurs, where they're going to go for the TMF source is the sponsor, not the CRO, not the sites, not the vendor community. So yes, there are regulatory requirements that are in place for those pieces of the puzzle, as I like to call it. But it's the sponsor's responsibility to make sure those pieces are following their regulatory responsibilities, whatever protocol, they're, trained on all of that. So it's the sponsor's responsibility to make sure they're following their responsibilities.
And having that oversight. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Really great responses to that, guys. And I think we have another question. Okay. What are the biggest myths or misunderstandings you've seen around who owns what in the TMF, and how do we correct them without playing the blame game? Ooh.
My favorite topic.
Yes.
Because I have battled this since the day I got here, of the TMF being clinical operations responsibility. And I know we can all relate. So, I won't get on a soapbox about this one, but I think it's all about, the verbiage, the way you approach the situation. I have tried to really break things out. So, for example, breaking the index out into different functions and providing that to, your DSPV folks, your statistics folks, your supply chain folks, your data management folks by their zones and by the classifications that are appropriate for their functions and saying, hey, it is clinical operations, house it lives in, possibly. In some organizations now, TMF is under regulatory, I've even seen, and some it's under quality. So, every organization is different. But I think it's really about how you approach the situation. And I would just, do it as kindly as saying, hey, CDESK TMF reference model zone 10 is data management specific. We're going to take a look at it and see, okay, are we expecting these classifications for, XYZ program that's starting?
Yeah. Great response. I think in my experience too, like having those SMEs involved when you're building your index, when you're doing all that is really important. I do think this is easier when you're dealing with a smaller organization than a larger one, for sure. But I kind of follow that same approach, and all the artifacts have a specific owner. They're aware of that. And also the reminder that just like anything else in the clinical trial area, the TMF lead or ClinOps or whomever may be the SME and the owner of TMF, but that doesn't mean they can't delegate and that others aren't responsible to contribute to that. So just because the data management lead has to write the data management plan doesn't mean that they don't go to others and have them contribute, right? So it's that same thing. So yeah. Okay, great questions. Okay, let's move on to our third poll here. Okay, who may be delegated tasks by the sponsor, provided responsibilities are documented? Give guys just a couple more seconds, get in there to that poll. All right, Danny, let's see what we got here. Yay! Okay, SMEs, whose job is that? Yes, it's our CRO. Anne, are you as thrilled as I am to see these results? Like, yay!
Yeah, absolutely. And some important things to note, that these tasks may be delegated to a CRO or referred to in ICH GCP as a service provider. The ultimate responsibility for everything still is with the sponsor. So the delegation is there. All of the agreements with the CRO should clearly define the roles and the activities, the responsibilities, and the sponsor is also responsible for overseeing those activities, making sure that they're carried out appropriately. Delegation happens, but overall responsibility for making sure that the CRO is doing that is with the sponsor.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because documentation is key. It needs to be clear for everyone, right? You want it to be very clear so that if there are questions or issues, it's outlined right here, right? So yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. All right, let's go to number 4. Okay, so who is responsible for submitting the protocol and other required documents to the IRB IEC? Give you guys just another few seconds here. Okay. Oh, okay. We've got a big mix. Okay. So, SMEs, whose job is that? Yes, it is the site. And I'm going to throw it back to you, Taryn.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of funny because all of our questions kind of umbrella the same concept of the responsibility for this task is on the site. However, if there's a CRO involved, then they're providing oversight that the site is doing it, and then obviously it is the sponsor's responsibility to have oversight to ensure that the sites are submitting those documents. But at the end of the day, according to the ICH R6 4.4.1, it is the site's responsibility to submit the the protocol and required documents to an IRB or IEC. And so they are the ones responsible at the end of the day for, communicating that out to that, regular review board or ethics committee. And, they are the ones responsible for sending that or providing that documentation to the CRA when they're on site. And then, from there, the chain of custody changes. So it goes back to the CRO and such and such and such. But you can kind of see how the ladder grows. And so at the core of this question, it is the site's responsibility. But at the end of the day, all factors involved will have oversight. So I do find it interesting because at the high level, Susan, the sponsor is the right question or the right answer here too, as well, because it is the sponsor's responsibility to have oversight and make sure that those submissions are submitted. But at the end of the day, the sites are responsible for actually submitting those. So for this question specifically, it would be the site.
Okay, it looks like we might have a couple more questions. So Danny, you want to give us one? Much is often delegated to the CRO, so sponsor oversight is key. What practical ways do you suggest for continuous sponsor oversight, especially in small companies? I'll give you guys the opportunity before I throw in my thoughts.
Yeah, I think honestly, process. I think what I see across the board is that and at some sponsors, some organizations, sponsor oversight is not clearly defined internally. And so first and foremost, it is establishing what sponsor oversight looks like to your organization for your different service providers. And not only the process, but how are you documenting your oversight? And making sure that it's, measurable and that it can be filed, within the TMF to show proof of that. And so first and foremost, I think it's important to establish those definitions of what your sponsor oversight will look like, because that is the first step in understanding what it is that you need to look at. And can you delegate that? And what does that look like? So I think first and foremost, it's having an understanding internally of what you need to do to ensure that you do have oversight.
Yeah.
And my first thought when this question came on was oversight plan. When I first started at Karuna some 5-6 years ago at this point, I was a team of one. So I, was running the internal TMFs we had and the external TMFs we had. And my first thing on top of the already existing TMF plan that existed was a specific, and I don't necessarily recommend this now if you have more than just the TMF outsourced to a sponsor, but we had a TMF oversight plan. And it really just detailed what the sponsor was responsible for of providing oversight to that CRO's activities. It spoke to the activities that the CRO had spoken to in the TMF plan. It became kind of redundant later on down the line when we did have oversight plans for, like monitoring and safety checks and, SDVing, things like that. It became more like redundant to have all these oversight plans. So we ended up just combining them into one sponsor oversight plan. So if you have, I think it's just kind of what delegated tasks you have delegated. And if there's multiple, it may be worth looking at, an overall overarching sponsor oversight plan to just, my key word and everybody of the TMF world should live by it is if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And that's the key here too.
Yeah, I work with a lot of small sponsors, and one of the things I really recommend is ensuring that, again, this kind of goes back to one of our previous questions, is ensuring that it's clearly documented within your TMF plan whose responsibilities are what, and that includes things like KPI. A lot of times sponsors end up using their CRO's TMF plan, but they tend to leave out the sponsor perspective. The plan is from the CRO's perspective. So when I work with sponsors, we have our own version, and even if we don't use it, we have certain sections that we require being put into the CRO's plan, and that can outline things like what the KPI expectations are, and what the sponsor oversight will be. But by having that KPI like listed in the plan, well, now when you have those weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever meetings you guys are having, they can be showing you these results of what your expectations are, right? And then you have ongoing oversight. Are they meeting the requirements that they're stating? Are they meeting what they're saying? So, okay. Oh, I think we might have another question. Is that right, Danny? Site performance and patient progress. Oh. Danny, are you able? Okay, this is the question. Okay. For some sponsors, I have encountered many of them delegate all responsibility to CROs. This puts a lot of expectation and responsibility on the CRO. In those cases where a TOR, transfer of responsibility, is signed, is it still on the sponsor to assume responsibility of the TMF in the end? Absolutely, ladies.
Yes.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the regulatory guidance says the sponsor is responsible. It's really, yeah. Go ahead, Terry.
My thought process is your Toro ends when your study ends. You know, I always say, like, I always joke with the other functions. It's like, well, what happens when your system gets shut off? Ours doesn't. Like, ours is a living, breathing, existing, validated system that doesn't get shut off. And so, yeah, it really is the sponsor's responsibility at the end of the day. Yeah, even if you have transferred those responsibilities, because you're transferring them for a period of time, not for forever.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Cool.
Anyone this one out? No? Okay. All right. So number 5. Okay. Who is responsible for ensuring the trial is adequately monitored? I have a feeling this one's going to be some split answers. So give you just another moment here. And okay. Yeah, see, this is exactly what I expected to see, honestly. Okay, so SMEs, whose job is that? Sponsor. It's a sponsor. So, India, you want to talk to us about this a little bit?
Yeah, I can definitely see why some votes are going more toward the CRO. I mean, I think we've talked about this in the last few questions about delegating responsibilities to our service providers. And so essentially you can delegate monitoring activities to the CRO, of course. I mean, we've all seen it, done this way within trials. But ultimately, of course, again, and I think those that are voting for the sponsor, I feel like you've gotten 100% on your GCP training so far, because at the end of the day, I think we're all told that we all have trained on the sponsor being the ultimate responsible party for the overall trial as it is, but they are responsible for ensuring monitoring is accurate, is adequate, the safety of the subjects, and ensuring that they're providing that accurate or the appropriate oversight over those service providers to ensure they're following the training that was originally outlined at the beginning of the study. And not only the training, but the protocol. That's the important part, important piece into this, ensuring that the protocol is being followed to a T. And then documenting any type of protocol deviations and anything like that to ensure that we are doing and putting our best foot forward in order to, be as accurate as we possibly can be when it's time to submit. So ultimately, it's the sponsor's responsibility, and also with the quality control activities as well. It's the sponsor overseeing that and making sure that they have the correct service providers in place to ensure that that is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So number 6. Who can assume sponsor responsibilities for specific tasks through delegation? Give me just another moment here. Okay. Okay, so SMEs, whose job is that? Our CRO, that's right. And I don't know about you, I'm excited that we're seeing a lot of CRO here.
Yeah. You know, a CRO can act on behalf of the sponsor in any capacity. They can take on the whole trial, but it's not a hand it over, wash your hands. All right, you know, they'll take care of it. The sponsor has to be constantly monitoring, you know, the study's progress, making sure that the TMF is inspection ready. So even if the CRO is doing these things, the oversight ultimately rests with the sponsor. See, a lot of these point back to the sponsor, don't they? You know,
Yes.
ultimately.
Yes. Yes, which I think everyone agrees was a really, really big thing with the E6R3 is like how much it made it clear goes to the sponsor. So
It's really important
wonderful.
too when you're selecting your CRO, you know, make sure that they're going to meet your needs. To be honest, you know, some organizations are able to give a cheaper price because they load more studies and sites on top of their monitors. And so how much attention are they able to focus on your study? So ask those questions to your CRO, you know, are they dedicated to one sponsor, or are they, you know, stretched across multiple? How many sites do you give your monitors? Like, make sure that they're able to give you the good amount of staff for your price, so that they can so things are handled properly.
Yeah, that's really great.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, I just had an old boss that used to use the term, make sure our CROs are fit for purpose. You know, make sure they're, you know, gonna meet our standards, but also not overpromise and underdeliver, because that is the number one. I mean, Anne just spoke to it, but the number one thing CROs love to do is overpromise and underdeliver.
Short-term gains are erased by, you know, long-term problems fixed later. So, you know, have a balance.
Yes. And, you know, keeping in mind our general theme of sponsor oversight here, if you're leaving your TMF with them, what access do you have? Are you able to get in there? Like, you know, understandably, a lot of CROs really limit the access they let sponsors have into the system, but when the sponsor is ultimately responsible, like, just be aware of that and conscious of that. Yeah. Really great points, ladies. Okay, our next question. Da-da-da. Wait, what question was that? Was that
I think
6?
that was 6. Yes.
6, yeah.
What, 6? Okay. Okay, who is responsible for training monitors and auditors? Oh, yeah, that's a good point, Danny. How long will they store it? Big question. Okay, all righty. So SMEs, whose job is that? It's the sponsor. We got a little bit of, this doesn't surprise me either. So, you know, I would say, I kind of want to throw this out to everyone, because I do feel like this is one of the big changes that was made really clear in E6R3, is that this is actually the sponsor's responsibility. Have you guys seen, like, was this a shock to your sponsors? Do they even know how to handle it? Any thoughts?
I mean, there's always been site training. You know, who delivers it can be delegated, but the ultimate responsibility to make sure that the materials are there, you know, that, you know, logs are ready to be used, or electronic logs, you know, if you're using a training management system for site training, but the ultimate responsibility is back with that sponsor. But yeah, it could be delegated to a CRO to train the monitors on site, or train the site monitors to train on site.
I have a feeling that it's really been a trend in the past that the sponsor, hires a CRO to do monitoring, and then they're like, oh, well, they're doing it. They're going to take care of all the training, and they kind of feel like, oh, that's it. And I think that's why E6R3 like really made this clear. Like, it doesn't matter if you're delegating this. You have to ensure they are trained properly, that they are qualified properly, so that they can perform the study the way they need to, right?
And I think
Yeah.
a big part of that is, while the sponsor can delegate the training, they are responsible for the content in which it's going to be provided within the training. So ultimately, this is why that responsibility so heavily relies on the sponsor, because they need to provide that information as to how they would like to see this, see the monitors see it through with the sites, and also provide the auditors with the opportunity to also understand what it is they're actually looking for and what they're auditing and what they're auditing against. So ultimately, the content lies with the sponsor.
And then ensuring that it's documented, right, guys? What's our number one phrase? It isn't documented. It didn't happen. So, yeah, so I don't know about you guys, but when I see a lot of missing training documents from a TMF, I'm like, oh,
either missing or not provided until like the end of the study, like, and you can't,
not provided at all, and
exactly.
you can't go back and just get that, or you can't go back and create that stuff. That's even a bigger no. So getting it contemporaneously, I love that word because it makes me sound really smart. But if you can get it, in real time with your visits or when that training is occurring, that's even better. But yeah, I think I think, Susan, we were talking about this earlier, the overarching concept of E6R3 was really defining that the sponsor is the responsible party here, no matter what they delegate, no matter who they delegate it to.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we still have a little more time for some questions. So number 8, if we bring our poll up, who must ensure access to trial-related records for audits and inspections? Give you guys just a couple more seconds here to get into that poll. All right, let's see. Okay, so SMEs, whose job is that? It is the sponsor. Yeah, Taryn, you just said that you actually just recently had an FDA inspection.
Yeah. So I will preface with the FDA is a little odd because they are kind of operating like it's 1990 still. I jokingly say that because they do approve our drugs, but a lot of their auditors that come on site will prefer access via a central laptop, which you provide to them, and it will have access to a shared drive on it. And then it's our responsibility to go into the TMF, download a clean source file for that with we had the watermark that said approved and the date that it was pulled and who it was pulled by, so that the auditor could see that it was pulled from the eTMF in real time. And then we would upload that file to that shared drive. I preface that with saying the EMA, MHRA, and other regulatory agencies are kind of more in 2025 and want direct access to your systems. So if you have safety documents in Argus, they're going to want access to Argus. If you've got CVs in quality, they're going to want access to quality, as well as the access to your eTMF system with all of your study documents. So it's important to identify if, I'm going through this task right now, if the documentation lives in another validated system at your company. say you have a QMS, say you have a safety database or an IRT or some sort of EDC or data management reading system, that auditor is going to say, from the EMA and other regulatory agencies, mind you, I would like access. I would like direct access to your system so I can mosey around and find what I need to find. Um, Luckily, I have not had to go through one of those audits yet in my career. I have spoken to some colleagues who have, and they do sound, slightly stressful because it is kind of just like somebody with no, well, and they have some knowledge, but very little knowledge of, TMF structure and TMF detail. So my number one suggestion when we did our mock EMA inspections was we provided an index, a clean blank index. Yes, thank you, Pam, for your comment. That's a good thing too. They're going to want access weeks before that inspection so that they can go in and do their due diligence and their work prior to that audit or inspection. Whereas the FDA is going to wait until like the week before and then send you a list of pre-requests that they want you to prep and have ready and pulled for them when they show up on day one. So it's kind of a split alleyway on kind of which path you take. But I think it's important from a process perspective to make sure you've accounted for both. If your company is or organization is submitting to those other regulatory agencies that want access versus the FDA, and noted the FDA is going to kind of, I will hope they will move into 2025 eventually and start requesting access to those systems such as the EMA and MHRA have. So I think it's important that we kind of take a hold of that process. So we started testing, external inspector user profiles and evaluating what information they could and couldn't see and making sure that they could see, blinded and unblinded, records, because obviously they need that. So, yeah, it gets scary because, yeah, as Ronla said, they have access then to, audit trails and, the created dates and the they have so much more insight. It gets scary. So then that, rolls back to the contemporaneous part of making sure your documents are uploaded when they're collected from a site and they're not sitting in a SharePoint or a central mailbox somewhere because, when they have that access to the system, all of that data is tracked. So if you have a document that was created, say now in 2025, but not uploaded till 2027, like they're going to be like, what the heck, Whereas with the previous way that it worked with not getting system access, they couldn't see a lot of that data. So
They were limited
yeah,
to what they actually asked for versus being
exactly.
able to go in and
Everything.
dig themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did have a question come in. Lulu asked, like, isn't it everybody's responsibility to ensure access to the trial-related records? And this comes back to really our theme here, is that it is the sponsor's responsibility when they're selecting a system, no matter if it's paper, if it's eTMF, whatever, they have to ensure that it is accessible for inspection readiness. And that includes an archiving, right? So even when being archived for 20 years, it has to be done in a way where it can be accessed for inspection, and that's the sponsor's responsibility. It all comes down to the sponsor.
Yeah. Yeah, and to Fran's point, they're going to ask for access to, additional systems and systems that your contractor or your CROs ran. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say that system has been closed, we no longer have access to it, instead of just kind of sitting there wondering what you do. It's better to have that information ahead of time. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to that because that was something that actually came up in our inspection of like, oh, well, why is this no longer available? And it's like, oh, well, actually it's no longer active. It's been closed down for this study. And then, we just provided all of the, data around the validation of that system and how it was shut down. But yeah.
Yeah, good point, Kayla. It is interesting, but I've been hearing this myself that they're wanting access early and they'll actually stay in longer. Like they'll tell you that the audit's from the 5th to the 10th, and then they'll stay in there until the 20th. So, yeah, they can do whatever they want. Like, I mean, they can ask for more studies, they can stay longer. I know we're right coming to an end of our session here, but ladies, thank you so much for all your valuable insight today. And thank you to all of the individuals in our chat and for participating in the polls. We hope you found it fun and informational.
Thank you all. This was great.
Thank you guys for the great session. Absolutely incredible. We'll see you guys at the rest of the sessions today at TMF Week. And yeah, guys, great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.